Welcome back again to yet another issue of your favorite source for summaries of stories from Marvel's Merry Mutants. That's right, we're the Newest Mutants. As always, I am Daniel Allen Lazarus, but you can call me Laz. More about me later. Let's mutate. Today we are going to be talking about Jean Grey #1, Volume 2. Let's first check out the covers. I've got two issues here. The first is going to be the direct edition, and the art is by Amy Reeder. Let's look at it. That's a beautiful piece, if you ask me. I mean, let's really quickly examine it. We've got, this beautiful Phoenix-esque art here surrounding the face of an ethereal Jean Grey. Also, I really like her logo, the title, the font. Beautiful. Now, we have a variant cover by Derek Chu. Oh, this is amazing. Look at this one. There she is in her Marvel Girl gear. I can't talk, but this is a really nice issue. I'm going to put up digital images of both so you can get a better look at them. They're great pieces. Before we dive into the nitty-gritty of the issue, let's learn a bit more about the creators of this book. We have Louise Simonson as our writer, Bernard Chang, artist, Marcelo Maiolo, color artist, VC's Ariana Marr, letterer, and Jay Bowen on design, and of course, our editor-in-chief, CB Cebulski. This issue is happening simultaneously to the events on Krakoa. If you haven't read the Hellfire Gala issue of the Fall of X, please do so. Otherwise, this contains spoilers. Our comic starts off with Jean Grey dying. Yes, if you know what's happening, she was killed. Murdered by a poison from Outworld in the hands of Moira X, who stabbed her with it. Jean is dying, and she is contemplating how things went wrong. She's trying to piece together memories and play out scenarios as to, how she could change things so that events that transpire against mutants, like the Hellfire Gala attack, don't come to pass. Jean centers in on a specific memory where her and the X-Men, pre-Giant Size #1 X-Men, travel to a dystopian future where they learn about the plight of mutant kind. While in the future, they train, they expand, and develop their powers and become more powerful for that. At the end of this adventure, they agree to not affect the timeline, and that means having their memories erased and all of the new skills and abilities that they've developed. Jean figures this may be a good chance of changing history, and using her powers to explore a what-if type scenario, Jean wonders what would have happened if she had not voluntarily erased her memories as she was asked to. This, of course, begins a domino effect. At first, it shows the X-Men sort of making novelties out of their new powers, but Cyclops playing pool with his optic blasts, Iceman making perfectly shaped ice cubes. This is when Professor X calls them into the danger room, where they quickly handle their business. Professor X quickly realizes that something is off, and Jean explains, hey, I no longer have a mental block on my powers, and I can control them. The professor urges caution, but Jean is like, hey, with me at full power, we are better equipped to fight evil. And so, they do. They encounter Magneto, and Jean, who doesn't want Magneto's ways to encourage more anti-mutant sentiment and hate, does something kind of unthinkable. While Magneto is bloviating about how mutants are superior, humans hate them, etc., Jean is like, no, the problem is you. You're a fanatic. And then she mentally handicaps him with her powers, basically making him a vegetable. Cyclops is like, why did you do that to him? Why did you do that? Jean says, hey, I stopped him. And she supports her actions by saying, you've been to the future. You know what it's like, Scott. Cyclops is worried about witnesses, and Jean is immediately like, I can just change their perception the way Professor X does. Iceman says, hey, I don't really like that, So Jean is going to be like, okay, we'll just control the spin on how it's perceived by the media. And with that, she gets the mutants in front of reporters to foster some goodwill. Professor X doesn't like what Jean and the X-Men did in regards to Magneto and gives them an ultimatum. So the X-Men leave the manor. In the next few scenes, we see them in a new apartment with Beast having just created a brand new Cerebro for Jean. The first mutant that they try to rescue actually ends up blowing up a building with a psychic blast of sorts as his powers are awakened. Luckily, the X-Men get there just in time to put out the fire and save lives thanks to the brand new Cerebro. Unfortunately, they couldn't save the mutant responsible. Jean uses her powers to, go into the mind of the dying mutant because she didn't want him to die alone. It almost kills her. Once again, the X-Men, though, are hailed as heroes, except Jean uses her powers to make the fire chief tell the media that, hey, it was a gas leak that caused the explosion, not a mutant. Once again, Jean justifies the use of her powers this way, saying that people such as Bolivar Trask would just use this as more fuel to his fire. The other X-Men are concerned that a real investigation might, bring up the truth of what actually happened in the building. They're really upset with her using her powers this way, and I can understand why. Jean, of course, is adamant that they stop the future that they went to from ever happening. Just a refresher in case you don't remember Bolivar Trask. He first appeared in X-Men number 14 from September of 1965. He is the scientist behind the Sentinels and a well-known mutant hater, famously portrayed by Peter Dinklage in the X-Men films. Unfortunately for Jean, the fears of the team were right. And Trask is like, hey, I now have indisputable proof that this explosion wasn't a gas leak. It was, in fact, a cover-up of a mutant attack. This, of course, sets the Sentinel Project into effect, and they immediately find where the X-Men are now living and attack them. Luckily, the X-Men escape. Jean is concerned about mutants that they know in the future who may start to exhibit their powers. So using her Cerebro, she sets out to save those mutants. This includes Kitty Pryde. Jean, of course, then uses her powers to tell her parents that they're just going to a boarding school. More mind manipulation from her. Next, they go to find Cannonball, who has in fact just used his power to escape a collapsed coal mine. Of course, Jean is once again worried that the Sentinels will find him and everyone that he knows, and Jean uses her powers to erase not only the minds of the witnesses, but of Cannonball himself, erasing memories of his friends and family just to protect him and the future. So they bring these new mutants, who also now include Danny Moonstar, to Professor X, where we see him now playing chess with Magneto, who is no longer a vegetable. Jean asks why Charles brought him back, and Professor X says, I believe in free will. Jean seems a little annoyed, and Charles is like, hey, I'm surprised this bothers you. Your philosophies seem to be kind of aligned these days. Magneto claims he could have shown Jean a better way. Jean says she won't kill. Magneto's like, give it time. Scott and Beast are still with Jean, but Iceman and Angel are kind of like, they're out at this point, and they want to stay with the professor at the mansion. Charles thinks Magneto would make a good teacher and protector for the kids. True. In the next series of panels, we get one of the few non-Jean-oriented sets of pages where Beast is having a conversation with a journalist. He is trying to convince him that Trask is just playing the media with propaganda, and he's kind of getting through. At least that's how he feels. That's when Jean shows up and just, psychically blasts the journalist, saying to Beast, oh, she knows too much. Beast is really mad. He's like, hey, I was getting through to her. And he calls Jean a monster. And reflexively, as if Jean psionically blasts Beast and turns him into a vegetable, Cyclops is there. He sees this, and understandably, he's a little upset. He's out. In this version of events, Jean now realizes that she is, in fact, a monster. She wonders how she can end the mutant hate, and she thinks about cutting off the head of a snake. and she wishes to no longer be alone in her crusade. And that's enough for the Phoenix Force to merge with Jean. With this, Jean begins to unleash the power of the Phoenix against her enemies, mutant-hating preachers, Trask, just to name a few, and the X-Men gather to stop her. They fail, and Jean, as the Dark Phoenix, consumes the planet. And then Jean is standing there alone. Presumably, we're just in her head as she's looking through other possibilities. And she sees another instance where she thinks, oh, things went wrong. And there's a glimpse at a space shuttle. And that's it. That's how it ends. Whew! Crazy comic. Awesome comic. Before we continue, of course, this is the part of the video where I like to talk about myself. And I hope you've been enjoying my coverage of the Fall of X story event. A little about me, though. One of the first Marvel stories I ever read was Giant Size X-Men #1. And that has always put me firmly in the corner of our mutant friends. They've always been my favorite part of the Marvel Universe. When I decided to more seriously collect comic books, the first older books I collected intentionally was the Dark Phoenix saga, which I still believe is the most defining X-Men storyline. Also, I need to do a little promotion as well. Please check out my New Mutants Lethal Legion playlist. I'm very proud of it. We did 5 episodes on that particular miniseries. It's very good. And of course, if you like punk rock music, my podcast Wrecked, a Fat Wreck fan podcast, is also something you can listen to. We love punk rock here. All of my links are, of course, provided below in the profile or wherever you watch this, hopefully, which is probably YouTube, but maybe you watched it someplace else. I don't know, but please, if you made it this far, like, subscribe, and comment. And now, back to the Newest Mutants. So let's have a little bit of discussion on this issue. Firstly, I love time travel. I love alternate histories, and nobody does it better than the X-Men, in my opinion, in the Marvel Universe. The X-Men travel through time a lot. This book has all of these classic elements of X-Men plots as well, but with the flavor of a what if. As far as speculation as to what she sees, what she got a glimpse of, it looks like it probably has to do, again, with the Phoenix Force. What I'm seeing, and it reminds me of the shuttle that Jean flew into the sun, I believe, in Uncanny X-Men #100. Jean saves the X-Men by piloting the shuttle into the sun, where she initially gets saved by the Phoenix Force. So I am wondering if now she's going to try and do something different and perhaps never become one with the Phoenix. Maybe if Jean just dies in the sun, saving the X-Men. I don't know. This is speculation. This is a very what-if style comic already, so I'm thinking the next one might be similar, but it might be different as well. Like I said, it's all speculation. It's all assumptions based on what I know and what I don't know, which is what speculation is. So it's time to check out my 3 favorite panels. The first one that I want to show you is sort of this classic looking image of Jean becoming one with the Phoenix Force. I'll show you from the comic, and hopefully I can find a digital version for a better picture, but check this out. You can see it right here. Jean is just, coming into her own with the Phoenix Force. I love it. This next panel is of the Dark Phoenix engulfed in flames, surrounded by the other X-Men with their Cerebro helmets on. This is some of the coolest art in the book. If not the best, image, it's really good. Look at that. I mean, that's incredible. Look at Jean. Now, both of those panels were excellent, but the panel that stood out to me the most is actually the very first page of this comic. And I really think Bernard Chang did a great job here. But it's Jean dying, and it's actually beautiful. So you can get a good look there. Hopefully I have some digital images of these to show you. But beautiful job. The art in this book was spectacular. Welcome now to my favorite part of the show, where I get to show off and, kind of brag about books that I have in my collection. Sadly, I don't have any issues from the old X-Men series before Giant Size X-Men #1, but I do have Uncanny X-Men 135. This is a classic John Byrne cover. Check it out. We have the Dark Phoenix grasping the X-Men logo and crushing it. Her face just flushed with anger. Here's a digital image of this. It is one of my all-time favorite covers. I love it. John Byrne killed it. Let's go. And that's the episode, folks. Coming up in the next few issues, we're going to be covering Immortal X-Men #14 and Invincible Iron Man #8, all connected to the Fall of X storyline. So I'm really excited to check those out and share them with you. Really enjoyed both of them. But I have to say, this issue, Jean Grey #1, outstanding. I highly recommend you pick this one up. It is a great chapter in the Fall of X story. But until next time, mutants, Excelsior.